Hello. What's up, A-kon Podcast family? Today we have the African Queen in the house.
Don't gas me up.
Mariam, how are you?
I'm doing great, Fiston. I'm so happy to be here. I'm so happy you thought of me. And I'm excited for what we have to unpack and share today.
Thanks for joining the show. I really appreciate this. I think being able to get, a Black Lives Matter activist like yourself on the show is very important. So let's see what we can, bring to the audience today. I guess before we even dive into everything, I would like to know, as a African American woman, how have you been lately with everything that's been going on? How have you personally been?
As a Black woman, it's been emotionally draining. And I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that everybody is on a different level in their journey. And I have just I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. So it's just, I'm literally at that crossroad where I'm just done with it. Like this is not okay. So it's generally it's taken an emotional toll. And it's extremely frustrating, especially at the same time also because I'm the only Black person at work. So it's a whole different level and a whole lot of unpacking. But it's been stressful. It's been exhausting. It's been painful. But I'm here every day doing what I have to do.
That's awesome. So for the audience to truly understand how you feel, let's revise a little bit your past, right? A little bit about Mariam. Tell us about yourself. What school you went to, college that you went to this point. Where you work. If you'd like to disclose that, sure. If you don't, that's fine as well.
So about me, I migrated to the U.S. Back in 2009. And so obviously I went to school in Boston, and that was really my first introduction to race as an identity, right? Understanding what it means in the context of myself and what it means in the context of America. So I went to school in Boston. I went to English High and then New Mission High School, 2 years of high school. I went to college at Bridgewater State University, obviously also another predominantly white school. And currently I work for the Boy Scout. And so although my counsel is better, I'll say, than other counsel in this line of work, it's still just me as a Black woman, as the Black person, the only Black person in the organization. So there's been a ton of exposure to being in predominantly white setting, and a ton of experiences have been developed throughout the time, for sure.
That's awesome. That's a good overview of what you've become and what you've been doing. So I'm really glad to know that. Personally, I know all that good stuff. But for the audience, you guys will get to pick a lot more from Mariam. Mariam, tell us your immediate reaction when you saw the George Floyd murder.
So I'll be honest, I did not watch the video.
Okay.
I don't. And that is my way of self-caring through this. I find these things to be extremely traumatic. Mm-hmm. And so I look to figure out the descriptions, right? How are people describing it? What exactly is happening? What are the images and the artwork that transpires? So I pay attention to that to understand what exactly happened. I don't necessarily subject myself to the trauma of watching the video and having that stuck with me. But I'll say it's super frustrating that in the midst of a pandemic, right, we're all home, we're stuck. We know that Black people are disproportionately affected by COVID. We're concerned with that. We know that Black people are disproportionately, most likely losing their jobs, right? Because the people that are losing their jobs are the individuals who don't have the capability of bringing work home. And a lot of them are, grocery workers and holding those essential jobs. And then through it all, we're learning now that racism is still persistent. We're watching Ahmaud get murdered. We're watching Breonna Taylor get executed. We're watching George Floyd die. And it was just, I think, a wake-up call for everyone because we now, for the most part, had the time to pause and really see this for what it is. So that was definitely frustrating. It was interesting, but it was very, very... it made me angry. I'll say the emotion. If I have to attach an emotion to it, was anger for sure.
With respect to that, let's move on to you. You have two Black boys at home, right? you are such a leader in my eyes, because being able to take care of two black boy teenager living in Worcester is not an easy thing.
Nope.
I want you to tell the audience, how does that, what kind of conversation do you have with those two boys after everything that's been happening?
So, I mean, I've had conversation with them from the beginning, ever since they arrived. I've kind of made sure they understood, right? In America, you're not always going to be viewed like everyone else. You're still black. You're still looked at to be, people would always judge you based on the color of your skin. We know you're a good kid, right? We know you're smart. We know you get good grades. We know you mean well, but they're not going to take the time to find that out. So I've had that conversation with them. And when they first arrived, we actually lived in Putnam, which is like literally white, like, and so there was a lot of things that they had to deal with in that school, being in a predominantly white school, and a lot of systemic racism that I saw them go through in that school, which is essentially what prompted my move out of Putnam to Worcester. So I've done my fair share of kind of telling them to be mindful and remember that this would always play out, and educating them about these things, telling them about other black boys, really boys who have been affected by this, right? The Trayvon Martin, the Tamir Rice, who was 12, making sure they're watching the movies, they're educating themselves, and they're really understanding who they are in the context of America. So we've had tons of conversation around it, and they've watched the videos at this point.
Do you have any like specific example of things that you've told them not to do or to be careful while they're in school or while they're walking down the side road?
Well, absolutely. Like, I remember that one of them, when he was in Putnam, actually experienced this thing where something that he noticed, something that his friends would do, right? They were white, that would go by, would always, prompt a call to parents, right? To me from school, he would always get punished for it. And so I had to use that as an example to see, just because you can have friends of all different races, but just because your white friends are doing this does not mean you should or you can, because it would always be put on you, right? I have to tell them to make sure to be careful when they're driving, right? Don't go over the speed limit. Don't do anything like that. Make sure you're cautious. I get tons of anxiety when they're out the house. I call them. You have to call me when you get there. You have to call me to tell me what time you leave the house. You have to call every second, like just always trying to do my best to protect them, even when they're that far away. But consistently telling them, you are black. The way you dress, the way you leave your hair, the way you present yourself would affect the way in which they see you. And so you have to keep that in mind as you grow. That's
a good point. Wow, you just made a lot of good points there. So to follow up on that, I would say that you as a young, woman, African American, raising these kids definitely speak to your leadership skills. It speaks to that woman empowerment vocal that you voice out there all the time. And I want you to kind of like talk a little bit about, what it means to you to be, a woman in a leadership position.
It means pride. It means confidence. It means that it means self-worth. In a lot of these spaces, I come in really, especially today now, knowing what I have to bring to the table. So I really carry myself in a way that lets my environment know that I did not get this job out of pity. I've earned it. I know my worth, and you are essentially lucky to have me on your team. And I'm okay. Like I'm dead serious, and I can find employment elsewhere. Like I really carry that confidence in me and in everything that I do. Like I can apply somewhere else and get that job because I have worked hard to build that up. But at the same time, I think for me, it also means that I get to create visibility. Right? I show up in a lot of these spaces. I do fundraising, and I do fundraising for in settings like the Seaport Hotel with the individuals in really the top leadership in Boston. And I work with them, and we raise funds for this organization. And I intentionally show up in these spaces, just highlighting, making sure that anyone else who looks like me can see that they can be in this space too, that they belong in these spaces. And so I've often done that, and I'm very intentional about how I show up in these spaces.
Dude, that's awesome. So there's a lot of young women out there who are looking up to you. Who are trying to see how you've been able to manage everything that you're doing. Taking care of your brothers from high school. Some are now in college. Feeding them. Being the only person in the house pretty much working. Full like not one time, maybe 2 to 3 full-time jobs. Managing all that.
Yeah.
And then having to be that leadership voice in the house. What's your message to those young girls? Can they feel like they can do it as well? Or is it overwhelming?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Anybody can do it. Is it hard? Yes. But it was never meant to be easy, right? Like if you look at the journey of any Black person, whether you were a descendant of African Americans here, slaves, or you were a Black person immigrant from any country, you know that the odds were always stacked against you. So it's not meant to be easy, but we can do it. And if anybody can do it, frankly, it's truly us. It takes a lot of determination, and you have to know what your end goal is, and you just have to stay focused and remember that no matter what's going on around you, keep on moving forward. And that's what keeps me going. So
well, I guess, ladies, you heard it first. Keep on moving forward. Take the task on, battle head on, right?
Never give up.
Never give up.
Never give up.
That's sweet. No, that's I think that's a good message. Someone like myself who has a lot of sisters, I feel like I don't know what the right message is to tell them, because the way I do things, they might not necessarily view it that way. Yeah. So they might have to take a different route. So hearing that from you, I think it gives me a little bit of ease to really look back at this podcast, be like, hey, watch what she said.
Whatever that is, right?
Later. Yeah. Watch what she said and then talk to me later.
Yeah.
I want to move on to your reaction to the protest that's been taking place in Boston. You and I actually went to some together, which I'm going to pull up a picture and we're going to look at it soon. But you and I attended some together, one together here in Boston. What did you think of that? Your outlook on the whole thing?
It was amazing. I'll say it was amazing to see. I've gone to protest. I've gone to march. I've heard the calls when it was Trayvon Martin, when it was Philando Castile, when it was Sandra Bland. I was joining these march, raising my voice before it was the cool thing to do. So this specific one that took place in Boston, the one we went to, the ones I went to after, have just been so much more beautiful in the diversity that it brought out. Like, people are really now listening and people are paying attention, particularly white people are hearing us, right? And they are learning at this point to understand what it really means for Black people, understand some of these inequities. And that was my happy moment. Like, I know the work is far from over. I am not naive. I know we have to keep applying pressure and we have to keep going. But I'm really, really happy to see that there is a cultural change happening, because culture always change before the laws do. So we are definitely on the right path, and I'm excited to see what else comes on after this.
Sweet. And so now, with respect to that, we see this type of protest takes place in Boston. All over the country, the same thing is happening. Speak to the anger that Black people really have deep within them, because a lot of people don't understand. They think that this is just based on the George Floyd murder. Although that, light the fire, right? Like, that light the candle up. But I feel like there's so much more that's deep there that we can't even express. Speak to that.
So it's a very simplistic view to think that, George Floyd died. This is all because of George Floyd. Before George Floyd, there was Trayvon Martin, 16. There was Tamir Rice, 12. There was Sandra Bland, Philando Castile. There was Ahmaud. There was so many thousands and thousands of just innocent Black boys and girls, Black men being killed at the hand of police brutality. And so I can't speak necessarily for an African American, because I'm sure their anger is far more amplified than mine, because they were born into this. They get passed down stories of what their parents went to. They were young and witnessed that, and they grew up in this neighborhood where they see it constantly. So can you just imagine years and years and years of systemic racism, and just seeing yourself all the time, you, your neighbor, your friend, your cousin, your parent, just getting killed for simply being Black. Like, And all of that just is what people are reacting to. Like, it's a lot compounded, and it's not just police brutality. It is the defunding of education system. It is the lack of investments in these communities. It is the school to prison pipeline. It is mass incarceration. I mean, we can go on and on. Gentrification. You kick people out their neighborhoods every day. So there's so much happening at the same time, and people really don't take the time to learn how deeply rooted racism is within the current system, and that's when they often miss the mark. Because you usually take big event like this and videos and something so blatant for people to react. And so if you think it's just George Floyd, do your research.
Right. But again, let's not miss the point that George Floyd's murder was again one of the craziest video that I've seen in my life, that you've probably seen in your life. I mean, there's been so many killings out there that you can't keep count.
Correct.
But again, like to your point, there's been so much that's been happening. There is so much anger that's been building up to get to this point, and people tend to miss that part.
Yep.
And all those cheerful protests that used to happen. Especially like athletes used to do by kneeling on the football field.
Right.
All those like simple stuff. Most black people are saying you never heard, like you weren't listening to us when we were doing it peacefully, in a sense, right? Or, well, I feel like we're still doing it peacefully because people are just marching. There are some rioters here and there, but
okay, that's where we're going.
People are still marching peacefully for the majority. Right?
Yeah.
Because you have been part of some big protests in your life, not just here in the U.S., but overseas as well. So protests could really get out of hand.
Yes. So. And it can get out of hand, and it does get out of hand. And if we have to address rioters, I'm going to say it very simply. If you are asking really genuinely focused on the violence and the riots, and not asking yourself why are people protesting, why are people so mad, then honestly you're missing the point, right? But at the same time, when you look back in history, please, if you're thinking the riots are bad and that's what's making you feel bad, let me know where in history has anyone gained their freedom peacefully. Has anyone asked and was given their freedom? People fought, people got mad, people died. People rioted in every aspect, every minority community, whichever way you look at it. That was just always part of it, because everybody have different level of anger. So, and everybody demonstrate that frustration differently. And so you can't judge how someone gets angry, right? How someone reacts to your behavior.
Right.
What you can do is control your behavior, listen to them, and solve the problem. If there was no police brutality, if there is no racism, there will be no riots. There will be no protests with regards to that. And that's just that.
I completely agree with you, because I think that's the question people should ask themselves before they get to the judgment. Because again, some of them are correct on the second half of their point, but it's like you got to really understand the first half of the point, which is, why are they doing what they're doing, before you could really place that judgment on them, right? With respect to that, the U.S. president himself, he's holding his rally in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and I think his people are saying pretty much that, he should be able to hold a rally if people are protesting. So are those two things comparable?
Absolutely not.
And why?
Absolutely not. People are marching for freedom. People are marching for equality. People are marching for justice. He just is there for a campaign stunt. And what's so disrespectful about his initial plan to do this on June 10th was that he purposely picked this day that commemorates and celebrates freedom and the end of slavery in this country.
But some people are saying that he didn't know what Juneteenth meant.
Oh, okay, great. But ignorance is an excuse.
Right, because my point is, you are the United States president, the most powerful man on earth. You have people who have been in government who've seen things and pass laws with regards to this stuff.
You know what, I think you're very kind to even go with that mindset. Here's my thing. First of all, if you don't know and you're saying you don't know, that's for a problem, period. That's your opportunity to know that America has been lying in its history textbook, purposely hiding the history of this nation, purposely ripping pages off the textbook, and you can try to use this as an opportunity to use your platform to do good. But it doesn't make sense, right? Like, there's no excuse for anybody not to know what happened. There's no excuse for anybody not to know about history. Educate yourself. If you're not being taught about it in school, you could have blatantly said, well, this is wrong that this is not taught in school. I'm sorry, I did not know. But Trump knew.
Right. So
Trump knew.
So
Trump knew, and Trump loves attention, and Trump loves controversy, and Trump knows that the more we get mad and angry and frustrated at what he does, the more fueled his base is, the more excited that they are. So Trump did that. Trump is a very strategic man, and he purposely tried to get reaction out of us, which is why I don't pay him no mind.
It's hard to disagree with you, but obviously people have their points, right? So with respect to that, you and I both went to high school here.
Yeah, we did.
And we took history in high school. I took even AP history. But not once we were thought about, like, they taught us what slavery meant to this country. Maybe it was touched upon a little bit, right, for the thought of it. But I don't think we really knew. I mean, until, if it wasn't because of everything that's happening, there is a lot of slaves, from our past who have done great things, who did great things within their time that we don't know about. We were never educated on. What did you think about that? Do you have any suggestion for, for instance, Boston Public School or like high schools in general to kind of get into that a little more, to educate people, to get back to that?
I think it was done on purpose. I think the system was set up to whitewash history, to make it more digestible to white people, to hide the truth of this nation.
Not to cut you off, but that's systematic racism right
Correct.
there.
Correct. So it's intentional, and the system is designed in a way to make black people look like, oh, slavery happened, we free them, that's it. That's all their contribution, right? Forget about everything else they have done. And then it takes off the pages of lynching. Barely you hear of the fact that white people would gather in masses and cheer as they watch a person get burned to death, take pieces of that person home as a souvenir. Like, right? Barely do you hear that. That's lynching. That happened in America, right? And it's crazy. And to me, it's on purpose. Like, Boston Public School knows this. Every school education system knows this. They know that they're not teaching the truth. And this whole part of defunding the police movement is about making sure that we're really doing right by the history. We're teaching the right history. We're investing in schools, and we're making sure people are being told the truth about this nation and its past.
I agree. I completely agree with you. So I think your suggestion probably would be to a high school, be like, hey, get back to that, right?
Teach the
people,
history.
Right? Start in middle school, matter of fact, right? Because kids nowadays, we learn fast. Everything is obviously online. People can go and do their own research if they want to learn on their own. But nonetheless, they need to implement it in the school system. So that way people know where they came from and what happened to them, right? Because sometimes in order for you to move ahead, you need to know your past, right?
Agreed. 100% agreed. And I think part of, there's no doubt about it. Like, they have to teach the true history of this nation so that white people and black people alike understand what it really was to be black, and the ways in which the system continued to oppress minorities across the board.
So with all that now, what changes do you think have been made so far to really like push us forward, to move us forward as a country in general?
I'll say the culture change. I'll say more white people are paying attention. I'll say they are trying to educate themselves. I think that is a big thing for me in terms of laws. We're still just getting those snippets, little things like here's a little nugget here and there. There hasn't really been an actual change, right? Like there has to be a change. It needs to be at the federal level. It needs to be across the board, all 50 states. That hasn't taken place yet. But I think the fact that there is a broader awareness and that the majority of Americans now are really paying attention and understanding that this is a problem, that is major. Because time and time again, our mindset have to change in order for us to challenge the laws. And so we're going to take this to November. We're going to take this to every election and so with our allies. And I think that's monumental.
Do you think that defunding the police is the right thing to do? Because right now it's become the right and left thing, right? Some people on the right side are saying, oh, like, we defund the police is going to be increase in crime, and Democrats are saying, well, if you defund the police, it doesn't mean that you're getting rid of the police, right? But you are taking some of that money that if the police is being funded by $100 million a year, you're maybe taking $50 million away from them and putting it into the communities that they were working with to actually help them. So you work in the community a lot, in different communities for that matter. What's your take on that?
Just do your research. If you feel like, oh my God, defund the police, so scary, do your research. There are places in America who have done it and have been successful with it. It's only in America, when you compare America to the developed world, right, that when a homeless person on the street, call the police. Oh, this is mental health issue, call the police. A black kid in the hoodie, call the police.
Yeah.
Oh, school problems, call the police. At the same time, they're defunding education, social services. They're taking away from all these other jobs, all these other individuals who are trained to de-escalate, who are trained in these things. We literally use it's just too much strain, too much pressure on police officers, and simply put, we'll be doing them a favor by limiting their jobs to actually criminal activities. That's simply what we need to do. Plus, they need more training, but that's a different topic. But we need to be limiting their jobs to criminal activities. When it has to do with mental health illness, let's get a mental health expert who's not armed, who's trained at de-escalating things. When it has to do with homelessness, let's get someone in that field. When it has to do with schools, let's get someone in that field. We do not need police officers in school. We do not need police officers answering to parties in the neighborhood. Like, we don't need them, because at the end of the day, what we keep seeing is that they're unable to look past their bias when it comes to responding to these things. And so for that reason, we need to limit their jobs to what it should really be about, and then allow other components of the government to do the work they're meant to do.
Right. So if any example activities within schools, which do you think by defunding the police and funding could help the community more? Like any activities in either schools or like different aspects of community engagement? Well, it could be like organizations that are directly dealing with high school students,
right?
Or like it could be organizations that deal with homelessness, anything of that nature. Do you think those are good examples that people can actually, the government or like people who are making laws could put their head towards and put their money towards to actually fund those organizations to really help the community?
That's what defunding the police really means.
Right.
That's literally what it means.
Okay.
Take money away from them. We don't need them to be military. We don't need them to be using war gears. When you're a police officer, you know you're putting your life on the line.
Right.
You know that you're at risk. You cannot chicken out when a 12-year-old is playing with a BB gun. Like, no, I'm so sorry. Where's your bravery and your strength in that, right? But essentially, to answer your question, yes, that's literally what it means. You take the money, give it to social services, give it to social workers who are trained to do. They're underpaid, overworked. Give them the budget so that they have the bandwidth, so that you have more people in that area to address the actual problems in communities, to make sure that everybody have the basic needs they have to not result to crime. And that's the thing. Why are people committing crimes? When you solve that, which you don't solve with the police, then you won't be worried about police officers just having to answer all these calls.
Right. No, I completely agree with you. Although, the police could be involved somehow, but they can be involved at the very first step, right? There are some of these stuff they can be involved towards the end.
Right, when it's deadly, when it necessitates, like, there's deadly, right? Like, there's deadly forces that is required, right? When lives are in danger, when there is, police can be involved in that manner, right? We need them for that reason.
Right.
But we don't need a police officer responding because a homeless person is on the street. Like, we don't need a police officer being called and responding because a black kid in a hoodie is walking around a white neighborhood, or because a black kid is running in a white neighborhood. The fuck does the police got to do with that? They're supposed to be stopping crimes.
True.
Literally stopping crimes.
Yeah.
Let them do that.
Let's jump into this.
I still love you guys, though. Police officers.
Yeah, I mean, you have no hate towards police. Because, again, I think you would agree with me that every police is not a bad police, right?
I don't, yeah, I definitely agree, and that's a fact.
And I think some people are portraying that that we're saying that every police is this bad.
No, we're saying the system of policing, systemic racism is the problem, right? They're part of a system. We have police officers getting fired when they stop people like the murderers of George Floyd when they're using excessive force. Right, those individuals the police literally run like gangs, but let's make that a topic because they do the no snitching thing, and then they do the don't get involved, and that's a problem. So they are still part of a system of systemic racism, and that's gonna have to be called out. The good cops would stay, and we can get rid of the bad cops. But
yeah. I wanna touch upon this because I thought this was a very interesting point thing that you did. There was a student at Bridgewater State University. Which is the school you went to.
Olivia.
You are an alumni of Bridgewater State University. You did a lot of great things there for that school by being part of different organization and really uplifting them. So what do you think who's this student? Do you have any relationship with this student, or how did this come about?
I'm a class of 2015, so she wasn't there when I was there. We would have probably set her straight then, but she wasn't there when I was there. And how did it come about? It just came to light. She posted on Snapchat. Someone screenshotted. Social media is officially the new court of racism. We judge everybody there. We let it be known and we put it out. And so it got to social media, and then everybody picked up from there.
I mean, once you put something in public, it has to be judged in the
eyes of the public court. Yep.
So what did she do exactly?
So she had on a face mask, which usually is used for pimples or clearing your face, whatever, but it was black. And what she essentially did, so it wasn't really her picture, and the fact that she was using this black mask, it was the caption that she has, which was basically "N bunny." And
what does that mean?
She had a little ears of a bunnies on it, and she had the face mask, and then her comment was "nigga bunny." And so the fact that she used the N-word in that snap as a caption to that is what set everybody off. And then, so that's when we started to reach out to the school authorities and make sure they do the right thing, because she does not belong in the BSU community.
Wow.
Yeah. And it's 2020. Can you believe this?
So by you and several other people sharing that on Facebook and calling for the school to make sure she's no longer a student there, how did the school take that? What was the process beyond that? Or did the school react to it right away? Or
the school reacted that they've seen it, and then they were investigating. I don't know how much investigation you need to do in something so blatant, but the school did essentially expel her, which was the right decision to make. But yeah, it took a lot of pressure. We were calling out, everybody was reaching out, sending emails and asking whoever we know to make sure that they know this is not okay. My feel is it's 2020. There's not one white person in America that doesn't know that using the N-word is offensive, one. And two, there's been so many other controversies and so many other students like her in other schools across the country who have gone viral, and there were consequences. Like, she knew what she was doing, and she purposely did it. And so she needed consequences for her action, because far too many times, white women specifically don't really get punished for the things they do.
Do you know if she's come out and apologized for what she did, or
she
no?
said it was a joke, and then we all were like, oh, hey, so funny. No. Sorry.
It's not really a joke, right?
Right. And I don't feel bad that she got expelled. I want to make that clear. Like, I really don't, because I feel like as a white woman, she's going to get so many chances as a white person in general. Someone else is going to bet on her. Some other school would accept her. She would have that opportunity. We have not ended her life no matter what she thinks, but we are teaching her that actions have consequences, and that's important. That's how we avoid the Amy Coopers that are calling the cops because a black man is just taking pictures of birds, right? That's how we avoid people calling cops when you're walking in a neighborhood, when you're just in a park. They need to know that when they do these things, there will be consequences. If not, our kids would die every day because of them.
So you just touched on a good point there. Privilege. That's the word, right? So you just said in your words that, without saying the word, that she has a privilege. You didn't end her life. You just taught her a lesson. Eventually, she's going to get another chance at another school. Somehow, she's going to be helped by either her family or someone is going to look at her skin color and be like, hey, you're fine. You've already gone through enough. I think you deserve some sort of chance now to like move forward with your life.
Right.
Talk about that, and talk about if that was a black person that did something so ridiculous in school like that, if they will get any other chance.
So that's what white privilege is. It is always assuming that white people mean well, even when they're doing detrimental things. It is second guessing and giving them essentially an opportunity after they mess up. But at the same time, we're punishing our black boys harshly. We're giving them no second chances. We don't give them warnings. We're sending them straight to jails. And so, and in many ways, no, if it was a black person, there wouldn't be a doubt. There's no doubt that this wouldn't even be a thing, right? Everybody would probably align to make sure the right thing is done, because black people, statistically, this is a fact, not an alternative fact. It's an actual fact. Black people statistically, because of systemic racism, are punished harsher and at more frequency, even when they're not committing crimes or anything else, at a higher rate than white people. So it wouldn't have been the same thing if the person was black.
Right.
That's just that. And so I thought it was an important lesson to send, and make sure that people know that we were all the same, black or white. If you mess up, there will be consequences.
Absolutely. That needs to happen. This is, like you said, a good teaching moment for her.
I hope she learned.
You have a lot of white allies, right? People
I do.
you consider allies.
Yep, I do.
And some of them come to your house. You know, you get together, have good food. What do you think they should be doing more of?
Speak up. I find that a lot of white allies, although it is good that they might be in their close-knit families and teaching the right things, right? I find that sometimes they're too afraid to address that racist uncle who just made a racist comment, or that racist cousin, right? Or bring it up in a larger family, or just call out their own people around them. And to me, I think that's the most important and so instrumental. Like, you have to do that. You have to make sure that you're also taking a part in educating the people around you beyond your kids. Or else, how are they going to learn? They're not going to listen to me. I'm probably never going to come and encounter them, right? I'm probably never going to find myself in their circle. And so you have to make sure you're always using your privilege to speak up and educate and make sure that people are aware and understanding of the things that are happening.
Right. I heard today that book sells about books that talk about racism has gone up, and people are buying. And again, that's a good move towards the right
Cultural
direction.
Change.
Right. So that's a good thing. One thing you mentioned on your Facebook one day that I wanted to read up to you, I thought was a really good quote, and people can definitely like take this on and read it and kind of internalize and digest for themselves. It says, allies can be just as detrimental to a cause as they can be helpful. They don't always get it. They don't always do the right thing. They can be enablers to their nice racist friends and family members. Often, they do this by rationalizing covert racism. In 2020, nobody should tolerate racism, whether it is covert or overt. Just saying.
Shots fired.
That's deep. Can you like
it is
digest that a little bit?
It is.
Tell us what you were thinking
It's
there.
deep and it's not. And my thinking is that based on my own experiences with allies around me, and I find that they are more prone to be like, well, yeah, I know this person don't get it, but she means well. No, she's racist. She makes me uncomfortable. She has a problem with people that look like me. I don't want to rationalize that, right? To me, it's that simple. But I also understand that my whole thought process through that is really, I've observed how whiteness transcended allyship, how them being white just literally was on top came before allyship. Because if you are a person of color, you don't get to disassociate niceness and racism, right? Because it doesn't go together. And so that's really what I was getting at. And the reason why I loved that status so much is because the best allies, take that feedback in and learn. The best allies know that they don't always do the right thing, but they're open to feedback. And that's instrumental in allyship. Just take a pause, ask for feedback, and we'll let you know if you're messing up.
No, you're right. So with respect to that, you have been teaching your brothers at home specific values, right? Respect, showmanship, learning when they do something wrong to apologize for it. Mm-hmm. And you also raised on your Facebook about raising anti-racist kids.
Yep.
So just like you're doing at home, teaching these kids all these principles, these basic human values, right?
Everybody should be treated
What
the same.
right? What do you think those white allies who want to do good can do for their kids and for their communities, and to those who don't feel like racism exists, which is laughable?
They're not allies. Those ones are not allies, let's be clear. Anybody who feels like racism don't exist is not an ally because they don't get the problem. What can they do? I think it starts with, I went to a march in Worcester, and that day ended up being a very bad rainy day, heavy rain. And then I look up and I'm just soaking wet, trying so hard to walk. And who do I see? This white woman, her husband, and their two little kids, just literally in this rain with us marching. Kids learn. They pay attention to what you say and what you do. What you're teaching them matters. And so if you're taking them to these marches and showing them that this is what you stand for, that's what they're going to turn out to be. If you are at home and watching movies, if they come back from school and maybe they picked up something from a kid whose parents isn't really teaching them enough and they mention it, then you definitely use it as an opportunity to let them know. There's so many books. What books are you exposing your kids to? Do they only have white characters, or are they black people in those books? Does it tell stories about black people and minorities? So there's just so many ways that you can do that, and you can just ingrain these values in your kids at early on, so that when they grow up, they learn to be anti-racist and they learn to do the right things all the time.
Right.
And that's the goal, not non-racist. Right, because people sometimes think, oh, I'm not racist, so I'm good. But no, that doesn't cut it. You need to be anti-racist. You need to actively fight against racism, or you're being complicit.
Right. So what about some of those white people who say, oh, because I have a black friend, I can say this,
I don't
and
see
I'm
color.
not racist.
I don't see color.
What do you say to those audiences?
That's covert racism. That's privilege. Your ability to, let's say, not see color, it's literally rooted in privilege, right? And a lot of these people, like I know, this guy that I know said, I don't see color at work. And we, explain to him why that's offensive. Because when you don't see people, you're literally stripping them from their history, right? You're not acknowledging what blackness means to me in this world if you don't see color. But at the same time, these are well-meaning people. But here's how you can tell that it's usually rooted in racism. So he goes to his kid's school, high school, and he noticed a post of a woman in hijab that the school had posted. And this was part of a larger campaign. And that made him feel uncomfortable. And he complained about that because that was not representative, essentially, of what him and his family and his kids looked like. That's racism. Like, not seeing color is racism. Like, it's covert. Yeah, it's not like KKK out on the street, black people, excuse my French, but it's still racism. It means that you're biased in a way that can affect people of color and that can be detrimental.
Your French was pretty good. I saw this picture on your Facebook as well. I thought this picture was magical. What was going through your head when this photo was taken?
This week actually was a very tough week at work. Going back to allies not doing the right thing, not stepping up, not calling out covert racism. And so it was very compounded and very frustrating to me because it was in the midst of really trying to get the organization who's claiming they want to do the right thing to celebrate Juneteenth the right way. And the amount of just obstacles that I felt like I encountered were so unnecessary. And comments were made that were racist, to say the least. And so that's what that picture and that caption meant. That was that Friday. And I went to a march and then I came back and I was like, damn, like, because essentially this white woman, long story short, and again, this is definitely me simplifying what she said, but the gist of it was that my blackness was offensive, essentially, to her. Wow. And I was like, okay, right, that's interesting. So that was what prompted that picture and that assertion in the space, right? Because you can't tell me that on social media because I'm black as fuck on Facebook, like, and I can say that and I can verbalize it. And I was like, after the protest, I was like, I actually want to go take a picture with this sign, and that's how that came to be. It was frustrating, a lot of anger that I'm still trying to unpack a few days later, and I had to take this next week off, so hopefully I can do a little bit more of unpacking and what that means and what that would look like going forward.
Wow, that's a beautiful picture, but like, it's crazy how this whole thing is happening, but people still aren't learning, right? I mean, as a woman of color, how do you deal with that if you feel like there's been so much within the span of the past 3-4 weeks, things are happening, but people aren't learning, people are still getting shot, right?
How do I feel? This is why I've become so unapologetic. This is why I've become so intolerant to racism. For a while, I'll be, we've all worked in a predominantly white setting and people would do really microaggressive things and brush it off under the table. But because I feel like so much is going on right at this moment, this is an opportunity for you to learn if you want to. And you're not learning, you don't want to. And therefore, I don't have to tolerate it. I am not going to tolerate it. I'm going to call you out on it, and I'll make sure you know that I know that this is who you are. And so that's just my part of it. And I'm just at a point where I don't want to make excuses for white people who don't know that racism isn't okay. I don't want to make excuses for white people who don't want to unlearn the racist behaviors that they have really learned over the years through everything. And we're out here fighting you guys till the last breath.
Absolutely.
No more forgiveness. That's done. Let that be the last thing. That if we're walking away from 2020, that's why I'm so happy that there's accountability. That's why I'm so happy when Karens get called out on social media, when anybody blasts it, when you say something, we pull it out, we get people to react to it, we let them know who you are, because you have to have accountability, and we're not going to be silent no more. Our silence has really played a huge role in maintaining the status quo.
I think accountability is still going to be a big issue for us as long as we have the biggest comedian as the president of the United States. But
that's true.
That's another.
But yeah, we can take that anger and frustration to elections in November. It doesn't matter if you support Biden or not. I know I don't, but you know what else I know? Law and order is not a thing. Racism is not okay. Discriminating against immigrants is not okay. Being ruthless and mean and hateful is not okay. So I'm gonna go cry about voting for Biden and still vote for him, because I'm gonna need a decent human being in the White House. End of story.
Exactly. So you just tapped into a really good thing there. You're still gonna vote for someone you really don't agree with everything on. Why someone like you is still going to vote for Joe Biden if he doesn't embody everything you have?
Because beyond political differences, there's a basic human decency and there's basic human value. And I need a leader, and I want a leader who can understand and who can respect that, who can see our differences and not attack it, not make people feel bad for being different. And for that reason alone, I know that if I don't vote, I'm essentially giving a vote to orange face. So for that reason alone, I'll definitely go and cast my vote. And I'll vote for someone who I don't always agree with, but I know has a basic human decency. I mean, if Republicans want to bring a different candidate, we can discuss, options of voting for that person over Biden. But Trump is just not it.
Right.
It's not a political matter, honestly. It's
really
just human.
isn't, right?
It's just a human matter.
At this point, it's just all
basic
about
human
principle.
decency. Yeah, it's all about principles, exactly.
Yeah. One thing I wanted you to touch on was the Juneteenth. I want you to define in your own terms what you understand with regards to Juneteenth.
Juneteenth itself is a celebration of freedom
for slaves.
For slaves.
Right.
So in history, in white history, they teach them that the signature of the Emancipation of Proclamation is when slavery was over. Well, guess what? Juneteenth, 1865, was 2 years after that, and that's when the last slaves in the U.S. were freed. That's when they knew that they were free individuals. So for 2 years, they continued to exploit these people for all sort of reasons. Refused to let them know that they were officially slaves. And so people literally, they were Union soldiers literally going around the country and making sure everybody in the South that was black knew that they were free now.
Wow.
And so that's what Juneteenth. And so when they arrived in Texas, Galveston, Texas, I probably am mispronouncing the name, but when they arrived there, that's when they freed the last 250 slaves. And that's what really, that's what people call it Black independence. That's what people celebrate it, because that's truly when black people were independent in the U.S.
Right.
So that's a little different than what happened in Tulsa. And,
with respect to the... Okay.
Yeah, the bombing. The bombing of Tulsa was the bombing of black...
business groups.
Black Wall Street, right? Like they say, pull yourself up by the bootstraps. Well, they did. And you burned it all down. And that was prompted, from my understanding, by an accusation that a 19-year-old black man had assaulted or something to a white woman or a white person, whatever the issue was. And that really escalated and led to mobs coming into Tulsa and literally burning down hundreds of businesses, literally burning down to the ground. Like there was absolutely nothing left.
And they probably celebrated that really well.
Well, you know what they do.
So
that's what happened in Tulsa, and that's why people were so mad that this guy was going to Tulsa on Juneteenth. And so Juneteenth was a celebration of freedom, and then Tulsa is where that happened, and he strategically was trying to go there and
kind of
spew out hate.
Except he said, in his own words, I think that...
He made it famous?
Thank you. I mean... Psychologically, how do you even think about something like that and say that you made it famous? Do you?
But Trump has. Okay. I'm probably gonna get some heat for saying this, but I really believe Trump has mental health issues. Like, I don't think he processed that. Like, nobody in their right mind, right? Like, this isn't about parties, right? Republicans have come before him. And they do not process, they do not say shit like that. Like this guy just says shit. Like he's like a 5-year-old that have no filter, no sensors, no capacity to process things through his head. So I don't know. I don't know why Trump says half the shit he says. Well, actually, 2/3 of the shit he says. He just says it.
What do you say to those people who really listen to him? Do they even know what's right and wrong anymore?
I don't say shit to them. Like, I feel like there's levels to this. Like, I would talk to you if you're trying to understand things. I would talk to you if you're on a path of understanding. But I'm sorry if you're just like that ignorant. We're not talking.
I agree. So
it's just pointless.
We also have those from our culture who have a different view than us. I don't know in which lens they really see this world or this administration in general. I want you to watch this quick clip.
Oh no, I don't want to watch Candace.
I want you to watch this quick clip of Candace Owens.
She's too smart.
She's become famous. She's super smart, I heard.
No, she's smart. She's very smart.
Yeah, well,
she's also a conservative.
maybe she's smart, but maybe intelligent just isn't one of the things she has. But she says, I do not support George Floyd, and here's why. Let's watch just a quick clip of this and see what you think.
No problem. Let's do that.
Hello, Facebook family. I have decided to do this video. It has been weighing very heavily on my heart and on my mind as well. And it was something that I wanted to say early on, but there were so many emotions and so much pressure for me to go with the popular opinion about who George Floyd was. And sometimes it can be difficult when there are just so many external pressures to say what you believe. And this was an instance where I felt like my silence would have been better in the beginning, but the more that I think about it, I realize that we are being sold a lot of lies, and at the detriment to the Black community, at the detriment to the white community, and at the detriment to America as a whole. So I want to come out and say that I do not support George Floyd and the media depiction of him as a martyr for Black America. I'm going to explain why, and I hope that some of you guys will understand where I'm coming from.
I'm going to stop it right there because there's no reason to really listen to her explanation of why George Floyd got murdered. You know, and I think she's thinking this is fiction.
I don't think she thinks it's fiction. I honestly think a lot of people do things for strategies. I think a lot of people are in a position where they do things for likes, for people to see. I think the reason why, because I think she goes on to talk about his criminal record, right? She said people are using him as a martyr. Nobody is, right? We have a Black man who got choked and executed and to death
Broad daylight.
in front of people. He was not armed. He was not resisting arrest. He was handcuffed. Right? So I don't, and nothing explains that. It doesn't matter. First of all, people were like, oh yeah, criminals are not supposed to be killed too. Dylan Roof killed 9 people in a church where he was given a burger before he was sent to prison, because they knew he was going down for life. Criminals in America, it's not the law in America that criminals get killed or people with arrest record get killed just because. He was not resisting arrest, and so his life matters. It's not a debate what people do before. But I would add, though, Fiston, that there's a purpose to that, right? Mm-hmm. There's a purpose to dehumanizing someone like George Floyd. There's a purpose to justifying actions towards someone like him. It allows white people to continue to just feed into this narrative that that's not a problem, right? When Trayvon Martin was 16, the pictures we were seeing of him when the media was covering this was so different than who he is. They purposely picked pictures that fit the profile, that make Black people look a certain way, right? And this really reminds me of one of my favorite quotes ever of Chimamanda when she said, the danger of a single story. If you, and the way in which you create single stories is really by showing people as one thing, only one thing, over and over again, and that is what they become. This is turning George Floyd into the narrative of he was a thug, or Trayvon Martin was a thug, Tamir Rice was 12, he was a thug, Eric Garner was a thug. They're all thugs, we get it, but they aren't supposed to be dead right now. That does not explain it. Thug is just quote unquote racist. It's just another way of, it's a new way of calling Black people the N-word. So it's a campaign and it happens, and that's what it is. That's why I don't fall for that. It does not matter what your arrest record is. It does not matter what you did in the past. What are you doing right now? What were you doing in this moment? You were not resisting arrest. You said you couldn't breathe. He literally kneeled on your neck for 8 minutes and 46 seconds.
Sheesh.
He wanted to kill you.
Not only that, he had his hand in his pocket.
Chilling,
he was comfortable.
He was chilling.
I never seen nobody comfortable like that.
So it has nothing to do. It doesn't matter what you do. You still deserve to be alive. That's what we have the criminal justice system for.
Right.
Let the
So,
court do their job.
I think Candace Owens' message to people is, I mean, she's a black conservative, she says, right? And for all those black conservatives there, their message really is black people need to have a different mindset, right? They need to be willing to vote for something other than a Democrat. But it's like
we should.
That's a good point, right? You should be able to vote for someone
It
different.
doesn't have to be rooted in my oppression.
Exactly.
It's or the Republican. If you look at the laws that the Republican Party are passing, if you look at what's happening in places like Georgia, the voter suppression laws, the extent at which they go to create laws to make it more and more difficult for black people to matter, black people to be equal, why would I want to vote for that?
Right.
Like, why would I?
Right.
Right? It's not about Republican versus Democrat or anything like that, right? Charlie Baker is, I'll say, decent Republican enough, right?
He is.
And so he didn't vote for Trump. Clearly, it wasn't a party thing. And I do believe people can have different views. I have absolutely nothing against people of color being conservative. Do your thing.
Right.
Nonetheless, I'm going to call out oppression. I'm going to call out racism. And if you see it, you can call it out too. You can be a black Republican and still say, fuck Trump, because Trump is racist. Fuck racism.
Say no more, lady.
You can legit do that. That's not a problem.
Say no more. I guess before we close this out, first of all, this has been a great discussion.
It's been fun.
This has been really awesome, really getting your take on all this. But because we want to use this platform to really not only educate those who don't know anything, but to give them a platform to speak on their mind and tell other people what they're thinking, to voice really their opinion, but also teach the young generation. So I want you to take this moment what's your message to young girls all across the country, white, black. You can start with black girls and then go into white girls. What's your message to them so we can move forward together?
My message, I'll say to black girls, is that black women are genuinely the most unprotected. So I want them to protect their energy. We really generally carry the weight, right? When they're killing the black man, we're out on the street and a black woman died, there isn't as much of an outrage. We really carry a lot of weight on our shoulders. That superwoman, superhero narrative, we don't have to be that at all times. So I really want black girls, black women all across throughout this to take the time to protect their energy, to self-care, and, take a pause if you have to take a pause, and make sure you're mentally and emotionally okay. And my message to white people, white girls, white women. Ooh, white woman. My message would be to white people in general, and it would be that racism is your problem. It's not a black person problem. Racism is your problem. Racism is what you benefit from. Racism is what you have created. Whether you do it, even though it wasn't necessarily created when you probably are alive, and so it is your responsibility to end it. You have the power to. It's not on us to end this. You benefit from this system. You have the responsibility to put an end to it. And now more than ever, we need you to, because enough is enough. It's just that.
Well, with that, we're gonna close it down for today. Mariam, thank you for coming on the show.
This has been fun.
I think this was good. I learned a lot from it personally. I hope that a lot of young girls out there also do learn a lot from it. We're gonna do more of this, obviously.
I hope. It's about to get interesting.
Yeah, so I'm looking forward to that, and maybe we could talk about politics across the world as well, and what's been happening. And so thank you for coming on the show. I really appreciate you. Do you have any last word?
No, I'm happy to be here. I appreciate you inviting me, and Black Lives Matter, period, by the way. Nothing else after that. And that's all.
Thank you, Mariam.
Thanks, Fiston. Have a good one.